The morning sun had only just begun its climb over the gleaming rooftops of Santa Barbara, but already the Pacific breeze was losing the battle against the heat, the salty air hanging heavy like a wet towel over the narrow streets and coastal shacks that line the city's old marina. The Ocean Breeze Repair Shack, barely more than a metal box on the edge of the Pacific Coast Highway, sat half in shadow, half in rising sun, its sign faded, its roof patched with tarp, and its doors wide open to let in what little wind remained. Inside, Ariel Johnson, a 27-year-old beautiful black woman, knelt beside the rusting hull of a neglected fishing boat, her face glistening with sweat, her black short dirty miniskirt streaked with oil, her worn boots digging into the dust and grit of the shop floor. Her hands, rough, skilled, scarred, moved quickly between a socket wrench and a cracked ignition coil, her eyes squinting through the heat haze, already tired though the day had barely begun. She hadn't had a full meal in 3 days. The fridge in her small one-room apartment held only mustard, expired milk, and a single egg she was saving for her sick mother. The bills stuffed behind the bathroom mirror, electricity, gas, medical, had red stamps now, and the landlord had left another note under her door. Final notice. Still, she worked. Her mother, Evelyn Johnson, once a vibrant woman who raised Ariel, alone with calloused hands and unmatched pride, now lay weak and coughing in a broken hospital bed shoved into the corner of their tiny kitchen. Treatment would cost thousands, and no clinic nearby would accept her without payment up front. Ariel had tried everything: odd jobs, secondhand tools, even begging for emergency assistance. But nothing ever came. But she kept showing up at the shop day after day under the burning sun because this place was all she had left. As she tightened the last bolt on the outboard motor, a sudden sound broke the heat-soaked stillness, the low, clean purr of a Rolls-Royce Cullinan rolling up like a ghost from another world. The tires whispered as it came to a smooth stop just outside the chain-link gate, and Ariel stood slowly, brushing her palms on her already stained skirt, her arms slick with engine grease, her brow furrowed against the glare. The car door opened, and out stepped a man who looked like he belonged to a world that didn't touch hers. Brandon Carter, 28, a white billionaire tech mogul with a jawline built for magazine covers and a body that moved like every road belonged to him. His luxury vintage mini yacht, polished to a mirror shine, was hitched behind the rolls, its engine apparently dead, and his crisp white shirt didn't even wrinkle as he stepped onto the pavement. Ariel didn't flinch. She'd seen plenty of rich boys roll through town, but none had stopped here before. "This the place that fixes boats?" he asked, his tone polite but cautious, glancing around at the cracked concrete, the rusted tool racks, the open oil drums. "It is," she replied, grabbing a rag to wipe her face, "if you don't mind the dirt." He gave a half smile and gestured to the boat. "Engine won't turn over. Thought I'd hit the water today, but—" Ariel was already walking toward it. She didn't ask permission. She didn't care about the price tag. She dropped to her knees beside the trailer, opened the engine hatch and dove in, moving with confidence, speed, and the quiet grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times with nothing but sweat and instinct. Brandon watched in stunned silence. Her skirt rode up slightly as she leaned into the engine, her tank top clinging to her back, revealing the outline of a body shaped by work, not vanity. He noticed the scar on her shoulder, the smudge of grease on her cheek, the steady way she whispered to the boat like it could hear her. 15 minutes later, the engine roared to life, a deep, clean purr that vibrated through the air like music. Brandon blinked. "You fixed it," he said, almost in disbelief. "Of course I did," she muttered, standing and wiping her hands, breath heavy. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a fat envelope of cash, 50s, hundreds, and held it out. Ariel stared at it for one long moment. Her stomach growled. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, but then she shook her head. "Keep it," she said, turning back toward the shack. "I didn't do it for money. You needed help." Brandon stood there stunned, watching her walk away, the rising sun casting a long shadow behind her as she disappeared into the same heat and struggle that had tried to break her for years. He looked at the boat, then at the engine, then back toward the woman who had just refused him, and in that moment, something inside him shifted. She hadn't just fixed his boat. She had left a mark on his soul. Sure to like this video, subscribe for more real stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep the fight for justice alive. The next morning arrived like a furnace kicked into overdrive, the Santa Barbara sun already slicing across the coastline in brilliant sheets of gold, baking the sidewalks and making the ocean shimmer like poured mercury. But Ariel Johnson was up before the heat claimed the day, her body aching from yesterday's labor, her hands still stained with grease, and her stomach twisting from another skipped dinner. The ceiling fan in her small one-room apartment above the shuttered laundromat had done little to fight the heat overnight, and her mother, Evelyn, had coughed for hours in her sleep, too weak to move, her lips dry, her breath shallow, but still smiling when Ariel knelt by her cot and said, "I'll be back by lunch, Mama. Maybe I'll bring something real this time." She kissed her mother's hand, stuffed a granola bar into her pocket, the only food left, and walked the short 3 blocks to her repair shack, boots thudding on the sun-softened pavement, not expecting anything more than another hot, slow day of silence and sweat. But as she turned the corner onto Seaside Boulevard, her breath caught. She froze. There, outside her rusted fence and crumbling sign, was a line of boats, 12, maybe more, lined up along the street, small yachts, skiffs, outboards, even a couple of jet skis, their owners standing beside them, all talking, looking toward the shack with anticipation. Ariel blinked, thinking it was a mistake, but as she approached, one man stepped forward, pointing. "You're the one, right? The woman who fixed the Billionaire's boat yesterday?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and urgency. "He told us you were the best." Word had spread. Somehow, someone, Brandon, she guessed, had told the world that the woman in the black miniskirt with nothing but her hands and her fire had fixed something no one else could. She barely had time to respond before another man held up a clipboard. "I'm next after him. Please, it's an emergency. The whole fuel system's shot." A woman with designer sunglasses approached next. "Whatever your rate is, I'll double it. I need it done today." Ariel was speechless, her mouth dry, her chest heaving, not from fear but from disbelief. For months she had worked alone, scraping by, sometimes doing full engine overhauls for $20 and a thank you, praying for just one break, one miracle. And now suddenly the universe had cracked open and poured a line of opportunity onto her doorstep. She unlocked the gate with shaking hands, her voice rough as she called out, "First come, first serve." Line up by the fence, and then she began. For 10 straight hours, under the punishing sun, with sweat soaking her shirt and salt stinging her eyes, Ariel worked like a machine, faster, sharper, stronger than ever, diving into one engine after another, identifying problems by sound, by smell, by vibration, her mind a blueprint of every part she touched. She skipped lunch. She skipped water. Her body moved on pure survival instinct, her heart pounding with the thought, "Every engine I fix is medicine in my mother's veins." Clients paid in cash, and she dropped the bills into a battered metal lunchbox near her tool belt, not counting, just trusting. By late afternoon, the line had thinned, the sun casting long shadows across the shopyard, and Ariel collapsed onto a bucket, her arms limp, her face dirty and radiant with exhaustion. She finally opened the lunchbox and gasped. Thousands. More money than she'd seen in one place her entire life. Her vision blurred and she nearly dropped it. The weight of hope too sudden, too sharp. She didn't waste a second. She locked the shop, ran to the pharmacy to buy Evelyn's prescriptions in full for the first time, then took a cab, her first in years, straight to Rosevine Medical Center, the best clinic in Santa Barbara, and demanded an urgent evaluation for her mother. The nurse took one look at the envelope of cash and the desperation in Ariel's voice and said, "We'll admit her right now." By early evening, Evelyn lay in a clean hospital bed with cold water beside her, an oxygen line helping her breathe, and a team of nurses already setting up tests. Ariel stood at her bedside, trembling, brushing her mother's hair with her fingers, whispering, "We're going to be okay, Mama. I promise you, we're going to be okay." Outside the glass window, Brandon Carter stood silently in a white button-down, arms folded, watching from a distance. unseen. He didn't approach. He didn't speak. He just watched the woman who had refused his money yesterday now claim the life she deserved with the strength of her own hands. And for the first time in years, the billionaire felt small in the presence of greatness. Wait! If you support racism, comment 55. If you stand against it, comment 77. If you've faced racism, let us know and share your story with us at our email in the channel description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. The next morning, the air over Santa Barbara carried a strange stillness, as if the city itself had paused to exhale after the heat and frenzy of the day before. And Ariel Johnson, still half asleep in her creaky apartment above the old laundromat, rubbed her swollen eyes and sat up slowly on the mattress laid out beside her mother's now empty cot. Evelyn had been moved to a hospital room the night before, and for the first time in months, Ariel had slept alone. Not because of loneliness, but because of peace. Her muscles ached like fire from yesterday's work. Over a dozen engines, nonstop sun, heat, hunger. But the pain felt almost holy, like proof that she was alive and winning, 1 hour at a time. She moved to the cracked mirror on the wall, brushed her curls back with her fingers, and was just about to head out to the repair shop when a knock came at the door. Sharp, professional, out of place. Confused, Ariel wrapped a towel over her stained tank top and opened the door slowly, expecting maybe a customer or a building manager demanding rent, but instead found a man in a white uniform, polished shoes, standing beside a gleaming silver delivery van. "Miss Ariel Johnson?" he asked. She nodded, confused. "I have a few deliveries for you. Please step outside." Cautiously, Ariel followed him down the stairs, out onto the dusty sidewalk, and froze. Parked directly in front of her apartment, glinting in the morning sun like a dream pulled from someone else's world, was a brand new pearl white Mini Cooper SE. Electric, custom wheels, polished interior, and her name embossed on a key tag hanging from the rear view mirror. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. This can't be mine," she whispered. The delivery man smiled gently, handing her a sealed black envelope with gold trim, and replied, "There's more, ma'am." From the back of the van, he carefully pulled out a red velvet box. Inside, a set of vintage brass keys, aged but elegant, with a note attached that simply said, "Your new home awaits. 1893 Seacliff Drive." Montecito. Ariel's heart slammed against her ribs. Montecito, that was billionaire territory. Beachfront mansions, private gardens, crystal views of the ocean. And 1893 Seacliff had been one of the oldest historical beach homes, long rumored to be off the market. She opened the black envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a short handwritten note on expensive cream stationery, signed in a style she immediately recognized. Brandon Carter. It read, "You fixed more than my boat. You fixed something inside me I didn't even know was broken. No one's ever refused my money before. Not like that. I've thought of you every hour since. Please accept these not as payment, but as a beginning. The car, the home, and something more. If your heart is open, call me. I'll be waiting." Brandon. At the bottom was his personal phone number, scrawled in ink. Ariel stood there, stunned, the sun rising higher above the rooftops, the luxury car sparkling like it was part of another universe, and she didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. Her heart was still pounding as she climbed the stairs, sat down on the mattress, and stared at the note again. Was this real? Was it a trick? A joke? She picked up her battered flip phone, the one she used only to call the hospital or answer clients, and slowly, hesitantly, dialed the number. 1 ring, 2. Then his voice, warm, smooth, and steady, answered on the 3rd. "Ariel," he said, like he had been waiting. She swallowed. Why did you? Brandon didn't let her finish. "Because I saw you, the way you worked, the way you stood in the heat, fixing something I couldn't even understand. And you didn't want anything. You just gave. People like that don't come along often. So I had to show you that I'm not just some spoiled man with money. I'm someone who recognizes greatness when I see it." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers gripping the note. "You're the guy from the boat," she said finally, realization blooming. "The one I didn't take money from." "That's right," he said gently. "And I'd like to see you again. Not in the shop, not in the dust. I want to see you as you are. Strong, real, beautiful. Bring your mother. I've arranged something special for tomorrow morning. Private beach, breakfast, no pressure, just a moment to breathe." Ariel didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But as she sat there in the morning light, surrounded by keys to a future she had never dared to imagine, something in her heart, something fierce, wounded and wild, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a trick. Maybe this was a door, and maybe she was ready to open it. The next morning arrived wrapped in soft sunlight and the scent of sea breeze drifting in from the Pacific. But for Ariel Johnson, everything felt dreamlike and unsteady as she stood in front of the mirror of her crumbling apartment, trying to figure out how a woman who had fixed boats in a black miniskirt and scraped by on pennies was now holding the keys to a mansion and a brand new luxury car, all gifted by a man she barely knew, a man whose boat she had repaired without asking for a thing. She hadn't told her mother the full story yet, only that they were going to the beach for a special breakfast. And now, dressed once again in her signature black, short, dirty miniskirt, her tank top clean this time but still humble, she gently helped Evelyn Johnson, now slightly stronger after receiving hospital care, into the front seat of the Mini Cooper, guiding her carefully as if she might break. The drive along the Pacific Coast Highway felt like a movie. The water glittering, birds soaring, sun dancing across the windshield. But Ariel's hands were trembling on the wheel. When she pulled into the entrance of Paradise Cove, a private section of the Santa Barbara shoreline, she blinked in disbelief at what greeted them. 10 black Cadillac Escalades lined up along the sand like royal guards, their polished surfaces catching the morning light. And in the middle of the beach, under a white canopy trimmed with lace and gold, stood a long wooden breakfast table set with crystal glasses, white roses, imported fruit, stacks of golden pancakes, and fresh lavender tea steaming in silver pots. Nearby, servers in white uniforms waited silently, and in the center of it all stood Brandon Carter, dressed in cream linen slacks and a light blue-collared shirt. Barefoot in the sand, his sleeves rolled, his hair tousled by the breeze, looking more like a lost poet than a billionaire mogul. As Ariel stepped out of the car, the sand warm beneath her boots, she clutched her mother's hand tightly and walked toward the scene with cautious awe. Still, unable to believe any of this was meant for her. Brandon turned the moment he saw her, his face lighting up not with lust or amusement, but with deep, vulnerable affection, and he walked toward her without hesitation, reaching for her hand like he had always known it belonged in his. "You came," he said softly, eyes locked on hers. "I wasn't sure you would." Ariel swallowed, suddenly unsure of how to stand, how to breathe. "I didn't know what to expect," she admitted, voice shaking. "All this, it doesn't happen to people like me." Brandon gently took her other hand, looked toward Evelyn, who smiled faintly but proudly in her wheelchair nearby, and then guided both of them to the breakfast table, pulling out a chair for Ariel and helping Evelyn sit with grace and dignity. For a long, quiet moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of waves, gulls, and the soft clinking of silverware being placed on porcelain. Then Ariel looked at him directly. "You did all this? The hospital, the car, the clients at my shop, that house?" Brandon nodded. "I did, but not to impress you, not to win you, because you've already won me, Ariel. When you refused my money, when you worked with those hands and gave with nothing expected in return, you reminded me of everything I forgot success was supposed to mean. You made me want to build again. Not just boats, but something real." She stared, stunned, and before she could respond, he slowly knelt in the sand beside her chair, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a simple gold ring, its band wrapped with delicate silver vines, elegant but modest, and held it up with shaking fingers. "Ariel Johnson, I know this is sudden, and I know the world hasn't always been fair to you, but I want to rewrite that story with you. I want your strength beside mine. I want your fire at the center of my life. Will you marry me? Will you help me build not just a company, but a life together?" Evelyn gasped softly, her hands to her lips, tears gathering in her tired eyes. Ariel froze, her breath hitching, her heart pounding louder than the crashing surf. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Brandon smiled. "I know enough. I know your hands are made of iron and love. I know your heart is braver than anyone I've ever met. And I know that I'm not here to save you. I'm here because you saved me." For a long moment, the whole world went silent, and then Ariel nodded, slowly, then with fire, the kind that had kept her alive this long. "Yes," she whispered, "but not because I need you, because I choose you." The servers stepped back. The gulls flew high. Evelyn let out a soft laugh between tears, and Brandon slid the ring onto her finger, then stood and kissed her forehead with the reverence of a man who had just found a cathedral in the shape of a woman. The breakfast was eaten beneath the sun, but what they were truly tasting was a new beginning, real, raw, and built on a foundation stronger than gold. Respect. The days that followed the beachside proposal unfolded like a whirlwind of transformation. And though Ariel Johnson had never imagined her life inside marble boardrooms or behind mahogany desks, she now stood at the heart of Carter Marine Innovations, not just as Brandon's fiancée, but as his equal, his partner, his truth checker in a world built on power plays and polished lies. The towering glass building in downtown Santa Barbara bore Brandon's name, but inside it buzzed with whispers of her, the woman from the boat shop, the mechanic in a skirt, the mystery who had stunned the CEO into rewriting the rules. Ariel arrived each morning in the same black miniskirt and work boots she'd worn under the sun, her curls pinned back, her face bare but confident, walking past executives in $1,000 suits who tried not to stare, their polite smiles hiding discomfort that someone from the outside now had an access badge and a say in major decisions. At first, she watched quietly, studying how people moved, how deals were made, how silence in meetings said more than words. Then she started asking questions, hard questions. She sat in on weekly finance reviews, her fingers tapping lightly as Brandon presented revenue numbers, growth charts, projections. But something didn't sit right. The numbers looked fine, but they felt wrong. Growing up counting food stamps and stretching pennies had taught Ariel to read money not from spreadsheets, but from instinct. "Who signs off on procurement contracts?" she asked one afternoon, and a silence dropped like a hammer in the executive boardroom. All eyes shifted toward Trevor Langston, the company's chief financial officer, a sharp-dressed white man with slick hair and a permanent smirk who had been with Brandon's father before the company even pivoted into clean tech. "I do," Trevor said smoothly, flipping a pen in his fingers. "Standard protocol." Ariel tilted her head. "And who audits the vendors you use?" Trevor's smile froze for just a second. "We have a third-party compliance partner." "When's the last time anyone looked at the actual vendor bids?" she asked. No one answered. That night, while Brandon slept beside her in their new Montecito home, Ariel couldn't. She slipped out of bed, opened her laptop, and began digging. She downloaded vendor invoices, mapped transactions, cross-checked names. For hours, she followed a paper trail that smelled more like smoke the deeper she went. Same companies, same signatures, overbilled parts, falsified maintenance reports, and all tied to shell accounts linked to a private equity firm quietly co-owned by Trevor Langston. She printed everything, dozens of pages, and in the morning, wearing a blazer over her miniskirt and a fire behind her eyes, she marched into the boardroom during the Monday stakeholder briefing, a room filled with investors, partners, and department heads, and dropped the stack of papers on the polished conference table with a single thud that silenced the room. "We've been bleeding," she said, her voice calm but sharp as wire. "And this man's been drinking from the cut." Trevor blinked, stood, tried to laugh it off, but Ariel didn't blink. Invoices, fake vendors, kickbacks, and here's the real sting. He's been doing it for over 6 years, starting back when Brandon was still in grad school. The room shifted. Brandon looked down at the paperwork, his jaw tightening. Trevor stammered. This is absurd. You have no authority to—" "I don't need authority," Ariel snapped, voice rising now, her pain speaking. "I have proof. And unlike you, I didn't steal it. I earned it with my mind, with my gut, with the same instinct that taught me how to fix engines before I could drive one." Security was called. Trevor tried to threaten legal action, but Brandon stood up slowly, looked him in the eye and said, "You're done here, effective immediately, and your resignation better hit my desk before your arrest warrant hits your door." When it was over, when Trevor had been escorted out, when the silence lifted, someone clapped, just once, slow and strong. Then another joined. Then the entire room erupted in applause. Not for Brandon, not for the company, for her, for the woman who had walked into a world that didn't want her and still rewrote the script. That afternoon, Brandon pulled her into his office and simply said, "You saved everything." But Ariel just smiled softly and replied, "No. I just did what I always do. Fix what's broken before it sinks." And in that moment, Brandon realized that the strongest engine in his life was not a machine, but her. Wait. If you support racism, comment 55. If you stand against it, comment 77. If you faced racism, let us know and share your story with us at our email in the channel description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. The morning after Trevor Langston was exposed and removed, the city of Santa Barbara seemed to breathe a little easier, the air lighter, the horizon wider, and Ariel Johnson, once a nameless mechanic sweating in the dust of a forgotten boat shop, now stood at the center of Carter Marine Innovations as more than just a woman who had uncovered corruption. She stood as a leader, a builder, a visionary. The media had picked up the story almost immediately. Black female co-owner saves billionaire company. From collapse headlines poured in, interviews were requested, and yet Ariel refused to glamorize her role, choosing instead to quietly focus on what mattered, rebuilding, not just the company, but lives. She walked into the office that morning in her signature black miniskirt and boots, not to make a statement, but to remind herself and the world that she hadn't changed who she was. She had only changed where she stood. With Brandon at her side, she helped restructure the entire firm, cutting out predatory vendors, increasing wages for workers, and investing in sustainable boat design labs that employed young black engineers, women in tech, and ex-mechanics like her, who were brilliant but overlooked. She turned an empty lot behind the headquarters into a technical training center for low-income youth, teaching hands-on boat repair, design, and digital modeling, all free, all under her leadership. She named the center Evelyn House after her mother, who now walked again, stronger than she had been in years, with color back in her cheeks and pride in her eyes every time she introduced herself as Ariel's mother. Their new vintage home in Montecito, once a fantasy, was now filled with life. Music in the mornings, coffee brewing, quiet laughter echoing from the porch as the ocean breeze slid through linen curtains. But even in her success, Ariel never forgot the heat of those early days, the burn of hunger, the scream of unpaid bills, the nights she held her mother's hand and whispered apologies she could no longer afford. Now those wounds became her fuel. On the one-year anniversary of the company's rebirth, under a clear blue sky with the ocean as backdrop, Ariel and Brandon stood side by side at Paradise Cove Marina, surrounded by reporters, clients, and families, as they unveiled the company's newest model, the EJ1 Legacy, a sleek, solar-electric luxury boat designed entirely by Ariel. Lightweight, sustainable, accessible, and powerful. As cameras flashed and the crowd cheered, Ariel stepped up to the microphone, her mother in the front row, Brandon's hand resting gently on her back, and she spoke with a voice steady from years of storms. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began, eyes scanning the sea of faces. "I wasn't supposed to own a company or design boats or sit in a boardroom. I was supposed to fix things for others, quietly, invisibly, and cheaply. But I learned something in the grease and fire of my old shop. When you're born in the margins, you don't wait to be invited to the table. You build your own. This company isn't just mine. It's every little black girl who's told she's too dirty, too loud, too bold. Every boy from a broken home who fixes things with his hands because books were too far away. Every mother who works double shifts and still finds time to sing to her child before bed. This isn't success. This is justice. Her words crashed over the crowd like thunder and light. After the ceremony, Ariel walked with Brandon to the edge of the dock, their fingers laced, the sun warm on their skin, and for a long moment, they simply watched the water, quiet, calm, alive. "Did you ever imagine this?" Brandon asked, smiling. Ariel looked out toward the horizon and replied, "I imagined something better. And now I'm building it." And as the first EJ-1 Legacy boat cut through the sea with smooth, silent power, leaving behind a wake that sparkled like diamonds, Ariel Johnson stood tall, not as someone who had been saved, but as someone who had saved herself, her mother, her community, and the future. The tides had turned, the winds had changed, and now she was the storm, and the light after it.